On a lonely dirt road, two shivering puppies ran toward a stranger, their tiny paws caked in mud, and their desperate cries begged for help. But when he followed them into the trees and discovered what they were hiding, his heart shattered, and the world would never forget what happened next. The man couldn't stop thinking about the puppies as he watched them sleep in a warm blanket that night. Their tiny chests rose and fell softly, and for the first time, they looked safe. But he knew he couldn't keep them forever. They needed a loving, permanent home, a family that could give them the life they deserved. The next morning, he shared their story online with pictures of the two pups, telling the world how he had found them trembling on the side of an empty road. He explained how they were abandoned with nothing but a crumpled note, left to fend for themselves in the heat. Within hours, messages began pouring in. Dozens of animal lovers reached out, offering to adopt or donate to their care. By the end of the week, the puppies had become a symbol of hope. A local rescue organization stepped forward, promising to find the perfect home where the two siblings could stay together. On the day he dropped them off, the man felt a pang in his heart, but it was mixed with relief. The puppies wagged their tails and licked his hands as if to say thank you. As he drove away, he glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. The puppies were safe, happy, and ready to start a new life. He realized that one small act of kindness had not only saved two innocent lives, but had also reminded him, and everyone who heard their story, how powerful compassion can be. Driving along the quiet country road, Mark almost didn't notice them at first. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the gravel shoulder, and everything seemed still. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw two tiny shapes, motionless. At first, until one suddenly lifted a paw. His heart skipped a beat. He slowed down, pulling his truck to the side. The two German Shepherd puppies were huddled together, their fur dusty and matted, and their wide, frightened eyes locked on him. One of them whimpered, barely audible over the sound of the wind. Mark opened his door and crouched down, not wanting to scare them. Then it happened. One puppy slowly shuffled forward and raised its paw toward him, as if begging for help. The other followed, pressing against its sibling for courage. Mark's chest tightened. They were trembling, weak, and completely alone. On this deserted stretch of road, someone had abandoned them here, miles from the nearest house or farm. In that moment, Mark knew he couldn't drive away. Something in their desperate gaze rooted him to the spot. Whatever had happened to them, he had just become the only person who could change their fate. Mark stayed crouched on the dusty roadside, his hand outstretched, letting the puppies come to him. The braver one, the same pup that had lifted its paw, inched closer and sniffed his fingers. Its tiny body quivered with both fear and hope. The second puppy hung back, ears flattened, letting out a soft, pitiful whine that pierced his chest. When Mark moved slightly, the timid one bolted a few steps back, pressing itself against the dry grass. These pups weren't just lost, they were terrified of people. He could see it in the way they flinched at every sound, every movement. Whatever they'd been through, it had taught them that the world was not a safe place. Mark gently sat down on the gravel to make himself smaller, speaking in a soft, soothing voice. "Hey, little ones, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." His words were low and calm, carried by the warm summer air. Slowly, after what felt like an eternity, the second puppy crept forward, trembling, and pressed its head against his knee. In that moment, Mark understood they weren't just asking for help. They were pleading for someone they could finally trust. Mark's heart pounded as he gained the puppy's trust. He noticed something odd. The pups kept glancing over their shoulders toward a thicket of bushes about 50 feet off the road. Their ears perked, and soft whimpers escaped their mouths whenever they turned that way, as if urging him to follow. Curiosity gripped him. He slowly stood, and the braver pup trotted a few steps ahead, then looked back to make sure he was coming. Mark followed carefully, brushing past the dry grass until he reached the edge of the bushes. That's when he heard it, a faint, muffled cry. It wasn't a bark. It wasn't a whimper. It was something else entirely. He crouched and pushed aside the branches, and his breath caught in his throat. Lying in the shade was a torn cardboard box, partially hidden under leaves. Inside were chewed rags, a cracked plastic bowl, and dark stains that made his stomach tighten. One of the puppies pawed at the box, whining louder. Mark realized the awful truth. This had been their home, abandoned in the heat, with no food, no water, and no protection. Whoever left them here hadn't just walked away, they had left them to die. Mark gently lifted the cardboard box from the dirt, his hands trembling as the reality of the situation sank in. The puppies circled his feet, their tails wagging weakly, as if sensing that someone finally cared. His chest tightened when he noticed something folded beneath the ragged cloth inside the box, a crumpled, rain-stained piece of paper. He unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was shaky, almost desperate. "Please forgive me. I can't take care of them. They deserve a better life than I can give." Mark stared at the note, a lump forming in his throat. These little lives weren't just abandoned. They were left behind by someone who had loved them, but had lost hope. He sat in the dirt for a moment, the sound of cicadas buzzing around him, trying to process the mixture of sadness and anger swirling inside. The pups huddled close, one resting its tiny head on his shoe, as if to comfort him. Their trust, despite the world's cruelty, broke him even more. Mark knew he couldn't leave them here another second. Whatever pain their owner had felt, these puppies deserved warmth, food, and love. He scooped them into his arms, promising himself he would not let this story end in tragedy. Mark placed the shivering puppies carefully into the passenger seat of his old truck, wrapping them in his jacket. Their tiny whimpers echoed in the cab, a haunting reminder of how close they had come to being forgotten. He turned the ignition, heart pounding, and drove toward the nearest animal shelter, determined to give them a second chance. During the ride, one of the pups climbed into his lap, resting its head against his arm as if it understood that help had finally arrived. The other, smaller and weaker, stayed curled under the jacket, its breathing shallow but steady. Mark spoke softly to them, promising that no one would ever hurt them again, and for the first time, the truck felt warm with hope. At the shelter, staff members rushed out when they saw him carrying the frail bundles. "We'll take care of them," one woman said, her voice full of both relief and heartbreak. They immediately checked the pups' vitals and gave them warm formula. Within minutes, the puppies' eyes brightened, tiny tails wagging faintly. Mark watched silently, a mix of sorrow and peace washing over him. These puppies had been so close to losing everything, yet here they were, alive, safe, and finally loved. Days turned into weeks, and under the shelter's care, the two puppies began to thrive. Their fur grew glossy, and their eyes sparkled with the curiosity of life they had nearly lost. Each time Mark visited, they sprinted toward the gate, their little tails wagging furiously as if to thank him for giving them a second chance at happiness. One crisp morning, the shelter staff had good news. A kind local family, with a spacious yard and two children who adored animals, wanted to adopt the siblings together. Mark stood by the play area as the family knelt to meet the pups, and the instant connection was undeniable. Laughter, licks, and wiggling tails filled the air like music after a storm. As the puppies rode away with their new family, Mark felt a bittersweet tug in his heart. He had saved them, but now it was time for them to begin a new chapter. He watched the car disappear down the country road, sunlight streaming across the fields, and a peaceful smile crossed his face. Sometimes, the smallest lives can remind us of the greatest truths, that even in the harshest moments, kindness can rewrite a story, and love can save a life.